So welcome here, our exploring manhood conversation. Love for you to just introduce yourself really quickly and let us know what brings you here, what's inspiring to you about a format like this, conversation like this.
So my name is Xavier. Where would you like to start? I was born in France. I can remember my past lives. I remember many past lives. I've done a lot of work on that for over several decades. I have traveled around the world, triggered by the realization 20 years ago that I was a little boy in an adult body, and that most men around me were also little boys in an adult body in a society that was supporting staying immature.
Right.
And I didn't want that. I realized this is dysfunctional, so I invested everything I have into educating myself and looking for the manhood initiations that I was missing, that I knew were present in some tribes around the world, in some traditions, but were not coming easily in the surroundings that I had. So I decided to invest everything I had. Instead of being part of a society where I would be having a nice house and a nice car, I decided to invest in myself and learn as much as I could and train as much as I could in as many different traditions and aspects of humanity as possible, because I realized that no one has the answer. I would find some little keys in one tradition, some little keys in another country. Yes, this piece I like about you and I can find it really useful for myself, but that other part does not resonate with me. So I found variety something that was very positive for me, because I could pick each piece, like picking all the ingredients of a cake and make my own cake. So basically it came out to like, yes, I can see all the colors of the variety of this planet, the ancient tradition, and I don't have to reinvent the wheel, but then I can create my own reality with my own wisdom coming from within.
I like that idea. It's almost like life is a treasure hunt where we get to adventure and go and explore, and then something resonates somewhere in some culture, and it's like, oh, that's a missing piece. That's what I've been looking for. And then a year later, we're over in a different culture, in a different tradition, and there's something else there for us. You said some big statements just in your opening there of being able to remember past lives. For a lot of people, the even possibility of existence of last lives is quite dubious. That could be a tangent we could go and explore for a while, I imagine. But the elements that you have found to be most informative for you from a perspective of manhood is what I'd love to dive into today. And I think a great starting point is this idea of little boys all around us that are dressed up in a man's body or dressed up in a man's suit. And then you also made the phrase that we're in a culture that supports that. I would go so far as to say we're in a culture that promotes that, that is invested in having adult children. So the psychology of a child in an adult body. And I think there's reasons for that. If you were to give an explanation of why you think that we have a culture that supports it, or maybe you believe it promotes it as well, why would you think that is?
Several reasons. First, most are unaware of it. They don't even know they are behaving like children because everybody does it. So they think it's normal.
Yeah.
And even though it has a lot of inconvenience and causes a lot of suffering, there's a wise saying that says, misery likes company. So because someone who's miserable, finding themselves with a lot of dis-ease, with the highest rate of cancer that we've ever seen on the planet, hospitals are full of incurable disease and mystery problems of people being depressed, and because everybody is like that, they think, oh, it's normal, we're all together, we feel less lonely. So they kind of support each other into this misery. And if there is no alternative, well, there's nothing to hope for except the next quick fix that will make us feel a little bit better tomorrow or today.
So you've got to. So you think it's primarily pharmaceutical companies or the...
No. I've never mentioned that. Pharmaceutical company. Pharmaceutical companies are only providing a quick temporary relief, but I don't believe in evil or in conspiracy theory. I believe in when someone has suffered enough so that they find inside of themselves the strength to do what it takes to stop the suffering. But for that, they need to embrace the suffering, because if we feel ourselves in a culture that is glorifying comfort or avoiding the suffering, then we will never find the power to have the clarity to look for what is the cause of my problem. Because if we remove the consequence, we'll never have because it takes maturity and determination and willingness and discipline to go and find the cause of what is causing suffering instead of avoiding the suffering.
Right. And embedded in what you're saying there, it sounds like you have a belief that suffering serves great purpose.
Every great philosopher, wise monk say, like, we live in a planet where there is balance. The yin and the yang, they come together. So the suffering comes in the balance with the pleasure, and without one, we can't appreciate the other one, because it's the contrast that makes us appreciate what we feel.
And so ergo, you're saying that because of the avoidance of the suffering and the movement towards pleasure and comfort, that there is an imbalance in our world today, and which is now making the suffering become louder and louder and finding more opportunities for it to manifest in the individual's life, in the cultural life, in the collective life.
It's well known that money doesn't make you rich. Sorry, money doesn't make you happy. Money is not the source of happiness. Look how many people are chasing money, even though they know it's not going to make them happy, because they heard it. And once they have all the money in the world and they have all these millions and billions and whatever, they are the most sick or unhappy person in the world, and they still do it. But when a man faces a manhood initiation, and he faces death, or he faces the challenges that are transmitted by the elders or the uncles or a group of men that have already had this healthy manhood initiation, then he's not chasing illusions anymore, because he knows what is real. He faces life and death at a very young age. It faces the consequences of his action. He realizes that behind suffering, there is the power of the universe to create life. Beyond death, there is the power to create life. He gets appreciation, he gets gratitude, something that if he doesn't have this initiation and he lives in a society that is glorifying comfort and immature behaviors, this truth, this knowledge, this experience of suffering and of maturity will chase him and follow him all his life until it falls on him in the form of a big problem that arrives in his life. An accident, a bankruptcy, a beloved dying, a personal accident, being in a wheelchair. Look how many people have big accidents, near-death experience, and then come back transformed and say, oh, this was the best thing that ever happened in my life, because now I know what true happiness is.
It's a very common story that I've heard from people after a significantly traumatic experience, that they recognize that it was life-changing for them.
Yeah.
A conversation we had staying on the beach over in Lembongan, we talked about the idea of rites of passage, and one of the key attributes of a rites of passage ceremony or experience for someone is when their typical pieces of comfort have been removed. And a very simple way would be for a boy to become a man is to take away all the comforts that the parents, or especially the mother, provided. Shelter, food, warmth, loving touch. So if we reverse engineered that to be able to create a situation where the child is alone, where they don't have shelter, where they don't have ready supply of food or water, and there's not comfort because there's no ready-made supply of what the mother and the father have provided for them, and they recognize their need to now provide for themselves. And I found that really an astute observation. And in my design of rite of passage work for young boys, they're the elements that I'd want to bring in to be able to help them recognize that they are now needing to claim responsibility for themselves, for their life.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, what I've noticed is that young boys, instead of getting that from the parents, because the parents do have sort of a rite of passage they put them through of saying, well, you need to leave the home now, get out of the nest and go and be in the world on your own. But then there's these whole array of different systems that are ready to capture that child, saying, okay, well, we've got government assistance for you for this, or come into the military where we will then present the structure and the parenting for you, or in this job here, come do this job, or university, or whatever it is, there are these systems that say, as long as you give us the authority to tell you what to do, we will support you. And the key attribute, if I boil everything down for me, of what it is to transition from a boy to a man, is to let go of dependence on any external system of support and be responsible for one's own life.
Yes.
Do you want to speak on that?
Absolutely. And what I found is that in traditional tribal societies, they were having manhood initiation that looks very rough on our Western ID, either being buried and being jumping on from cliffs, or being left out without shelter and food in the bush or in the desert, which can be very rough. But the common point, and in some others it's different, it's being in a cave, like you can be meditating in a cave. So they all have different reality. But really what I found the common point between all the ones that I visited, studied, practiced, witnessed, and tried to put myself under is the education, is the mentality that you are going to be put as a child in a situation that is going to be difficult, and you're going to experience something very difficult. You are going to have emotions that are really strong, and you're going to want to give up, and you're going to think you're going to die, but it's okay, and you're not going to die, and you're going to experience something better on the other side. So actually, what I found after putting myself into many difficult, very difficult situations, which in our society we would label as savage or wild, or it's not humanly okay, or there is blood and things like that, so it's not okay anymore. But really, what I found is that life as we live it every day, even in a city, will provide us a lot of situations where we can experience and feel the same thing, as long as we embrace the challenge with the right mentality. And the knowing that today I'm going to be placed under a challenge that is going to allow me to experience the same manhood initiation as if I was in the forest, or as if I was somewhere else. Because, for example, take a young man who is starting his business. He's going to be put under a huge stress. He's going to be put under financial responsibility. The consequence of his action, if he makes the wrong decision, he's going to feel it. He's going to feel all that.
Yeah.
So we don't really need to go in the jungle and be buried alive and covered in red ants to become a man.
No, and it can be really useful to still do that. And I've been with some Kenyans from the Maasai tribe and a few different tribes that and heard in-depth descriptions of their process of initiation. And there's the group in Amazon that have these bullet ants, that they have to wear the gloves and do the dance without showing any pain or fear.
Yes.
And like, if you haven't heard of the bullet ants, they're one of the most excruciating insect stings in the world. And I really like the idea that you're presenting, that a rite of passage is not a single event that happens in a man's life that they are before and after. Although it is a before and after, the after is not the destination. The after is the beginning.
Yes.
Until the next before.
Yes.
And then there'll be another after, and
Yes.
then another after, and another after. And that
Yes.
perennial meeting of the rite of passage, of going deeper into manhood. And to me, manhood isn't a destination. It is a process. It is a perpetual claiming of myself and my authority and my experience from moment to moment. Mm-hmm. And there's an artistry in it, of whether it's in a business, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's walking down the street and then seeing something that you have this impulse to interfere with, or to interface with, I should say. Maybe there's a child that's fallen over and hurt themselves on the road, but you're running late for work and you have this moment of discomfort. What choice do you make? And there is a before and after there. Mm-hmm. You may choose to then continue on to get to work, and then you'll be with the consequences of that. And maybe there's some shame that you didn't help that small child. Or you help the child, you're late for work, and you get to be with the consequences of that. And there may be some pride that you then did something that was uncomfortable and risky, because you may have lost your job. And it's those little moments, as you were saying, that defines a man to me. Yes. Especially the moments. For me, yes. It's especially the moments
yes.
when no one else is going to see that choice. No one else other than myself in my heart knows that I did a thing then, no matter how small. I'll give you an example. The other day, I had my organic bin over here where I put food matter in, and there was a little tag, a little tiny plastic tag like of a new item of clothing that they attach the price tag to. Tiny bit of plastic, and I just flicked it down into the organic bin, and I walked away and I was like, that's not the right thing to do. And I'm like, but it's so small. And I had this whole dialogue, and then I paused, took a breath, turned around, went fishing through, grabbed the piece of plastic out and put it into the trash where it's supposed to go. No one has known about this until I'm telling you now. And yet I can track back that moment of one of the moments that I decided to show up for myself in a way to claim my authority, my responsibility for my whole life.
Yes. So this is exactly what I'm in line with when I say we don't need to go in the forest and be covered in ants. We can find in everyday life so many situations, because this life is a fractal, this reality is a fractal. So as you mentioned before, we have patterns that keep coming again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So in this small little, it looks small and mundane to go and pick up a label in the trash. But to do this, you had to stop what you were thinking and what you were doing naturally, stop the path of ease, and go out of your way and go and do something that you would not usually do, that is more difficult, which means you gave up your comfort, you gave up the cleanliness of your hands, and you spent more time than you were planning, so to go and do something that is the right thing to do. Without expectation that you would be rewarded or have gratitude or social recognition or anything. But the magic of that is that you feel better about yourself.
Which is the reward.
Which is the reward, yes.
Yeah.
So this is a very small example, but it's the same essence as going to do a manhood initiation with elders or with uncles or with the tribe in the forest or in the bush. Except one that is so big and done traditionally in their culture as a little boy is going to be so big in life that it sets them up for life in their society. Our Western life has many of these little ones when doing the right thing, like you mentioned, helping someone in the streets and facing the fear of being fired at work because you're going to be late. And you have this very important meeting, but hey, you could choose to help an elderly cross the street because it's the right thing to do, or someone who's hurt right now, and face the risk of losing your job and do the right thing and feel good about yourself, or choose fear and say, no, I don't have time, and behave like a robot and feel with the regret, live with the regret and with the remorse of not having done the right thing.
It's interesting you use the phrase to do the right thing to do. And the idea of integrity for me is to be in constant relationship with what is the right thing. And I would even dismiss the idea of right. It's like, what's the honorable thing to do? And you mentioned culture specific before. A rite of passage is culture specific. So a rite of passage will be designed to prepare a boy for manhood in that culture. Like a Kenyan rite of passage is not going to prepare a boy for life in the Western world. It's going to prepare a boy for life in tribal Africa.
Yes.
But the idea of integrity being this perpetual attendance, relationship, contact with that sense of what is most honorable for me to do right now. And it may not be the right thing for me to help the kid on the street if I'm more in relationship to my job and my work in keeping that. That's the right thing for me to do. And it may be the honorable thing in my mind as well. And to me, I'm more interested in someone coming into contact with that sense of honor, and are they honoring their sense of honor or not? Because when they don't, there's this erosion. There's this erosion of themselves, of their sense of worthiness, of sense of righteousness, of sense of groundedness as a man in themselves. They've let themselves down. They've betrayed their basic sense of honorability. And that can be a hard thing to recover, especially if they accumulate over time.
Yes.
And I'm really in encouragement of men to find how to be in integrity with their sense of honor, even in the smallest of acts, even in the acts, like you said, where no one else is watching, there's no reward, external reward for it at all. Yeah. So I want to get a little bit more personal, and we're talking about some big concepts, rites of passage, honor, what it is to be a man versus a boy. But for you, in your cutting edge, like where you're working at for your manhood, if there were three things, the top three things that you're working on, could you identify three things and share them with us?
Three things that I am working on right now.
Yeah.
Constantly improving myself. How can I be a better man for myself? And because I'm becoming a better man for myself, I can share a better man with my surroundings. So,
okay, what does that mean to be a better man?
it means that my level of vibration is more aligned with unconditional love, with powerful unconditional love, with values that I choose to embody in this lifetime.
Okay.
So when I say I remember my past life, I remember many of my past lives. And as you said, it might be a concept that is a little bit difficult to understand with some Western culture. I discovered this 20 years ago when I started meditation and deep meditation, like silent meditation retreats. And going back in my subconscious, like bringing my subconscious conscious, being aware that memories were coming back from childhood and then before childhood and then previous lives. And so then it's like, wow, okay, I have memories and I have visions that feel really real. It feels like a memory in this lifetime a few years ago, but it's not in this lifetime. And I had many of those. And then I realized I'm not the only one having this. In fact, looking, because I'm also a scientific, I studied quantum physics. I was a mechanical and space engineer for 25 years in France. I mean, until I was 26 years old in France. So I have a very scientific way of, and mathematical way and logical, I explored all this. But I realized, studying the world population, that actually the percentage of the population that does not believe in reincarnation is actually the smallest. Like most of 90% of the world population is not even a question. And we are regarded as retarded, I would say, by 90% of the world population. Like little children trying to take over the world because of the fear that we're going to die. This is why we are trying to take over the world and control everything, because we don't have the peace knowing that everything is okay and we should just like take care of each other and enjoy what is here and appreciate what is here instead of trying to control everything.
It's a beautiful concept to, well, maybe not so beautiful, but it's very elegant to suggest the behaviors of the Western world is often stemming from this great fear that we're going to die, and our time is limited, so we have to get it done now, and leaving a legacy for our children is the only way that we have any agency of impacting this reality long term beyond our lifespan. Mm-hmm. But again, getting back to you, so becoming a better man was your first one.
Yes.
What would be the other two?
Raising my vibration on a daily basis so that I live in the truth that I just shared, of that everything is okay and that I am an eternal soul having the opportunity to live on this planet, instead of having my subconscious switching to survival, which is making me behave in a way that is not what I choose to live from in this lifetime. So I'm very aware of the fact that inside me there is a switch, in my nervous system there is a switch, and very often there's a subconscious switch which, for whatever reason, something is happening on the outside, or past memory or unresolved past life or childhood trauma, will trigger a response inside me that will switch to survival and fear instead of unconditional love and generosity and deep presence. So I'm very aware that very often this switch is unconscious.
Okay.
So I'm working on becoming more and more aware of myself and conscious of myself, so that I become aware of the fact that suddenly my nervous system has switched to survival, which can be like fight, flight, freeze, hide, which in our Western behavior is very often seen everywhere, except most people just live with it because everybody does it. When you see people running around with suits all over the streets and from meeting to meeting and appointment to appointment, it really looks like fight and flight. Or when you see people depressed, it really looks like freeze or hide. So becoming aware when I am exposed to this edge of, oh, I'm about to switch to survival instead of creator, like I can really see that there are two modes. There's survival and creation.
Understood.
So, and very often I am unconsciously switching from one to the other. So really working on becoming aware of when am I on the edge of switching, playing with that edge, and being able to expand this state and this awareness. And if I go into survival, find ways to come back into creator mode and peaceful mode, which is much nicer for everybody around, and share that with other friends.
Okay.
Friends, clients, brothers. I work mostly with men, but also women, and like share as many techniques as possible, because someone who is happy does not destroy the planet. Someone who is deeply happy in creator mode does not cause suffering. Someone who is in fear of survival, very often it's me first, because there's an emergency, and don't even look at what's happening around and causes
so I'm
suffering.
noticing in your descriptions, there is that survival mode and that unconditional love creator mode that you speak of, the switch, and see something very visceral in your nervous system. That you seem to have a lot of focus in the world of the people that are living in that survival mode. And I'm feeling in you an avoidance of those things for yourself, but also a judgment of those things in the world. And I just want to bring you back to something that you said, the suffering serves great purpose. And there seems to be an avoidance of this suffering in the world and in yourself. And how does that land when I ask you that question?
Yes, absolutely. And also, do I really need to destroy the planet to realize that we had all the resources in the world to save the ocean and the forest and not suffocate ourselves with excess of carbon fuel pollution? Do I really need to go through the suffering again of watching children dying of asthma and of cancer because they breathe toxic fume in the streets, while some people say that, oh, there's nothing we can do about it?
So I'm detecting a lot of pain in you as a man, noticing the world in some of its unconscious patterns, as you, I imagine, would call it, and that's creating a lot of pain in you to witness this. And this sense of your past lives and the way that you've navigated it, that you feel like you've learnt this lesson, that you don't want to do this anymore, and yet you're confronted with a world where it's happening, and you're in the world where it's happening. And I'm hearing that there's a lot of pain for you in that recognition of you being in that place.
There's a lot of pain when I'm not aware that I have a choice. And the pain was caused at a point when I witness people who don't know that they have a choice because of miseducation, because of ignorance. But once they are offered the opportunity to see that they have a choice, then there's empowerment instead of victimhood. So, for example, you know you have a choice to leave pieces of plastic in your organic compost bin, which will contaminate and leak some toxic plastic chemicals in your organic food that you're growing with your compost, or you have the choice to remove that and do the right thing. But you know you have a choice. But a lot of people don't know that they have a choice because they've been told that they don't even know they don't have that whatever is coming out of the exhaust pipe is toxic and will cause cancer in their children if they breathe it every day for minutes or hours a day. They don't know that.
And I'm hearing in this, what you're sharing now, that there's a recognition that this needs to change in the world. This level of awareness of people, of their choice to be able to do the right thing. And I'm hearing that you find great purpose in interfacing with that unconsciousness. And so do you feel like it's your driving purpose to help people to come into more conscious awareness so that they can, it seems like the main thing is to live in harmony with the planet, to create a more healthy environment for ourselves, seems to be the leading things for you. Does that feel accurate?
Well, I have felt enough suffering. So when suffering comes my way because of the consequence of my action, of my mistakes, I deal with it. But I make a choice of, as much as possible, not create more suffering and create more healing and more information and possibilities for people to live in a more harmonious way. The same way as you make the choice to have clean organic compost that will be used for growing the most healthy vegetable you can imagine, instead of put everything in the rubbish and then send everything for someone else to deal with it, and use fertilizer that would be chemical that would then cause toxicity in your body and cause maybe disease or later. So this is a choice I choose in my life. I have great pleasure exploring ways to live better and sharing that.
Yeah. Okay, so we got to be a better man, to elevate your consciousness awareness of the choice to be able to live in creator mode versus unconscious mode. Mm-hmm. They seem very intimately linked, those two. Being a better man seems to be more conscious of your choices. It seems like that's the thing there. If you had a third thing that's very personal to you that you're working on, that's an edge for you in manhood, do you have an idea of what the third one would be?
I have great pleasure when someone has tried everything else in their life and they come to me because they heard about it. You should try working with this man. And they tell me, wow, this is the best thing that I've ever done. Probably some of the most challenging, because the concepts that I'm working with are not as easy as taking antidepressants or watching a video or something like that. But when someone tells me that their life is transformed, and then I walk around in the street and I see people walking from the other side of the street to come and meet me and thank me because their life is much better since we've been working together or since they've been practicing what we've been practicing together, this is a great pleasure for me. And when I see them happy with their children or their family, and they tell me they save 10 years of trials and error by being more guided. And for me, this is something that I want to transmit, because I'm grateful, because when I started looking for answer, realizing that I had a problem, I was an immature child in an adult body, I looked for answer, and I found elder men who were 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years older than me, who generously shared their experience with me. And there was, of course, an exchange, because I invested all my savings in that. Some was for free, some was charged, some I had to travel and pay for airline tickets, everything. But I've got so much gratitude that this is what I want to give back. I received so much, and I feel that in experience, we can save time. Like if someone has walked over the edge of the cliff and fell and broke their leg, and then they look at me and say, be careful when you arrive at the edge of the cliff, open your eyes, because I walked over that cliff, broke my 2 legs, and I had for 6 months to be in a wheelchair. I feel it telepathically. Something inside me received that knowledge. I do not need to walk over the cliff and break my own 2 legs to know to be careful. But if it's a dogma, something that has been read in a book, or heard, or brainwashed into me, there is a part of me that doesn't really integrate that. It's the same as when you tell a little child, don't climb on the wall. The first thing they do as soon as you turn your back is they start climbing on the wall. So this is this difference that I'm passionate about transmitting. How can we not have to reinvent the wheel and completely destroy the planet? Like, it's really important to realize the planet is on the edge of collapsing. Like the ecology, 90% of the fish in the ocean are gone. We are cutting forests as fast as possible, like removing the lungs of the planet. Like, some things has to change quickly, otherwise there's going to be great suffering happening very fast. And I think we have the power to change things. We have now communication. We can now, this interview, this video can be shared with someone on the other side of the planet who has the possibility, like they say, think globally, act locally. We are now have more power than ever to reach every single part of the planet. So someone who has an issue with whatever they have in another country can look at a video from a tribe from the other side of the planet and find a solution that would save them 20 years of trials and error. So now, if there is willingness, we could do anything. We have more power than ever. So I'm really excited about that and sharing that.
Okay, yeah. I can feel palpable your excitement and determination with it. So the three challenges or things that you're working with regards to manhood seem very intimately tied to me. The being a better man seems like a broad overview of what that means, and then when you unpack that, it means that within yourself to encourage more of a choice of conscious behavior that is aligned with creation and unconditional love.
Yes.
And then also then to spread that to others, to encourage people to awaken so that they can start, specifically you keep coming back to caring for the planet, and to be able to shift the direction of the global ecological issues that we're having into a more sustainable, harmonious way. And yeah, I'm hearing a very significant amount of alignment for that. Well, maybe from a perspective of people that you work with, or issues that you're noticing that men are coming up with, that they're, when men are describing to you what their challenges are in being a man today, like things that I often hear is a lack of purpose, difficulty with relationships, a struggle with understanding how to set boundaries for themselves, or to not be a doormat in the world. These are big issues that men tend to be struggling with fairly universally in the Western world. What have you found?
They are amazing, exciting subject to practice, because a lot of them are very easily addressable, and the improvement of the situation that each person is will create great pleasure. The same as you shared, that the moment you decided that you're going to spend 5 more minutes waste, or spend 5 minutes going back to your compost bin, getting your hand dirty, picking up this piece of plastic and doing the right thing, you felt good. Even though you cancel your plan for the next 5 minutes and you change and you have to wash your hands and you had to make a sacrifice, but it felt good. So this essence of transmitting to someone who doesn't know, because they have not received that transmission, that healthy transmission from the elders, which is the common thread that I found in all those manhood initiation, is the healthy transmission of what is healthy to make an effort, what is healthy, where should I put my energy, and what is an okay challenge or a not okay challenge. So for example, someone who has all these issues that you shared, being a doormat or lacking of purpose, are very easily transmittable. They used to be transmitted by elders, because the elders knew who they were, because they had done their work, they have faced death, they have faced life, they've had experience, and they received that from their great-grandfather and their great-grandfather. The tradition were healthy and transmitted. I'm not saying it's still perfect, because I've seen a lot of ego. This is why I'm very supportive of finding our own choice and not receiving a dogma, because we clearly see that receiving dogma don't work. Religion, there's a lot of very unhappy. For some it works, but for the majority, religions are being pushed away and are causing more crimes against humanity than anything else in the world. So it's not a solution. It has some good parts, and it has also some pieces that are very challenging. But all these little issues that you're finding are basically just little problems that can be very easily addressed. And it actually feels really good when they're addressed and successfully overcome.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
strong agreement with that. I think I would argue that to the men that are experiencing these issues, they're not little things. They can be quite significant and debilitating problems that they find a sense of being lost in and hopelessness in. And yeah, but when they are addressed, there's a liberation of energy for them, that they then feel much more capacity to engage in the world in a way that is fulfilling to them. And yeah, I do feel really curious about the areas of your life where you are still learning, rather than the things you figured out. There's a lot of things that you feel like you've figured out in terms of how to interface with the environment and with your health and with men and with transmissions of information. What are the things that you're challenged with, that you actually don't have an answer to, that you're actively working on? If it was the concept of your leading edge, like the places in your consciousness where you're at the edge and you don't have an answer, where there's still confusion, and maybe we can put that into the ring here, that we can both look at that concept together. What's something that you still feel a sense of confusion on in your life?
The thing that comes to me is I've had for all my life appreciated. I was born into a very healthy community. It was a very healthy unconsciously created, but consciously created community. So it was a little village, like an eco-village before they were called eco-village. It was the government before the governments. I mean, somehow feels to me like it was not corrupted. Mm-hmm. It was not based on economy and on economic return or anything. It was just, let's create a beautiful development in the countryside to help young families have a healthy life, and the government was giving very low-cost loan to young families. So they created a village in the middle of the countryside in France, out of nowhere, so that there was no traffic through, no trucks going through. It was actually really safe, with about 2,000 houses. And there was a school, there was a little supermarket, there was a doctor, there was a dentist, and all the kids, we would just go to school by foot, all go walk together to the school, walk home, go to the forest and play. It was like heaven.
Sounds amazing.
I know, and I realized, wow, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. I had parents who consciously chose to conceive me. They consciously wanted a child, they planned it. They said, okay, this is the plan, this is where we're going to live. So I'm very lucky. So I'm trying to, because I realized for a long time I didn't realize how lucky I was. So I said no to all this, and I left to the other side of the planet to go and live in Australia. And then I realized, as I was traveling in many different countries, realized that I had been very lucky to realize that, and not everybody has the opportunity to be, while they are vulnerable, in this such favorable condition. And I realized that this favorable condition is like growing a vegetable garden. If we create a space that is protected, that has fertile soil and rocks to protect and regular watering, the vegetables have much more chance to grow in a healthy way. So I realized that creating these spaces where human beings can grow in a healthy way, in a happy way, while they are vulnerable in the childhood stage, is necessary, or is something that I would love to do. Because I realized that what I received, not everybody was lucky enough to receive that. And when I see how struggling some men, adults, men, women come to see me with problems, I say like, well, if they had a healthy childhood in an environment like mine, all the problems that they have, the lack of life mission and disempowerment and disease that they have, would not even be there, because they are the consequence of not having had a fertile environment, and in fact having a toxic environment. So I'm helping them clear the consequence of problems that could have been avoided very easily.
There's apparently a book I haven't read. I heard about a guy named Luther Burbank wrote this book called Raising the Human Plant, mm-hmm. and the concept of creating a garden and allowing the vegetables to grow, and that metaphor being to describe a village that grows children. I really appreciate that, and there's been a lot of different people that I've respected over time that have spoken about the need to return to more of a village life, or the small community where everyone knows each other, where there's that ideal number of about 150 people that are in some sort of community, or maybe up to 300. That's the size of the tribe, and that where kids are safe and they can walk around and play together and interact with the adults as they like. Maybe the young boys want to go and explore what it's like to be a farmer or to be a hunter, or the girls can go and have a look at so-and-so who's really great with sewing, or and to be able to interact like that. And the closest I came to it was being in Costa Rica, and there was a community there that I lived in for a few months that had some really amazing children that were growing in that community. And it's a common dream for many of us, and for me as well, to have some land, a property, where we can essentially homestead on it, but not individually, not in isolation, but in community, where there is a community there, where there are houses with people that have a family, but the families are all connected more intimately than, say, in a suburb or something, where there's regular meetings and opportunities for collaboration on growing gardens, or having a weekly dinner together where all of the families come together and share a feast, or things like this. Feels like a return from this isolation that the ego has been experiencing. It feels like we were once probably I saw on a beachhead in Australia one time on Fraser Island, there were these soldier crabs that were on the sand, and there was a vast array of them across this beachhead, and they were moving along, and then as one they turned direction and moved, and there would have been thousands of these crabs all moving together. And that was my first direct experience of group consciousness. And I imagine at some point in human history, humans were like that. We weren't individuated egos. We were just this human consciousness that was doing its thing as these, amorphous consciousness that was in these disparate little pieces that we call individuals. But maybe there wasn't an individual ego. And then as time has gone by, there feels like there's an experiment of the ego progressively getting into nations, and then into a village, and then maybe into a family unit. Now that's the individual unit. And I'm seeing a lot in the clients that I'm working with, the fracturing of their own ego into these multitude of parts. And then we've got diseases like multiple personality disorder, or maybe more appropriately schizophrenia, where people are fractured in their own ego mind. And it feels like there's a call for us to start to return and integrate, and instead of being these individuated pieces of the whole, to start to recognize ourselves as the whole again. And I think one of the ways that we can do that, rather than having children leave home at 18 and go live on their own in a small studio apartment where they're isolated and in their own mind and disconnected from everyone else, to start coming back into community and start to live together and start working together and build back that sense of integration into our culture.
Thank you for sharing that. Over the past 20 years, I've visited many communities to see, okay, what is the perfect community? What is the perfect way of life? Something that I've noticed is intelligence needs variety. So what I've noticed is that the children being raised in perfect paradise communities from the 70s and 80s and 90s, as soon as they can, they want to leave. They're like, this is boring here. I want to go and be in Amsterdam. I want to go and live in a city. So it's very important, because whatever they have received, they want something else. And it's not because they are unhealthy, it's because it's okay to go and experience something. What is very important, though, is to have the opportunity to experience, to have the freedom to experience what we want or what we need to experience. Because if we don't have the freedom, for example, now I've observed something in Australia. I lived for 20 years in Australia, and everybody is complaining about the fact that houses are becoming so expensive that our children are not going to be able to afford their first home house. They are not going to be able to afford a house. So a whole generation, who is going to suffer because they can't afford a home, and therefore they feel completely homeless and in scarcity and in fear, because they have to live under a landlord who is going to flip the house and sell it on the market for profit reason, because every 6 months they want to sell the house, because for tax deduction reason it's more convenient for them to sell the house and sell it every year or every 6 months, and therefore the tenant, our next generation who lives in it, feels completely unsafe because they don't have a roof above their head, because for tax saving reason the house is going to be sold. And this whole government, several generation, majority of people are just like completely like, oh, we want our profit, we want to pay less tax, so we have to sell the houses and use them as commodity or as trading stock, but it's also the home for our children. And someone has to say, hey, we can't play with some things, it's not okay to play with. Like, there needs to be accountability and integrity and dealing with the consequence of our action. And a lot of these older generation who are retiring with a certain amount of money, and there's this advertising and glorification of some people who are telling, I'm going to show you how to have investment properties. And they brag about having several investment properties, and they have 10 and they have 20. So I've got 500 investment properties, and these people are made like the best ones. They are the best in our society because they have millions or billions. I mean, how many billions do you need? And because there is a certain amount of houses in Australia. So if one person owns 500, it means 499 people. Let's say you can give him 10 houses so that he has his retirement. But what about the 480 houses? Does he need 1 billion per year income, or is 2 million enough? So
when you identified earlier that very beautiful assumption that a lot of the devastation that we're seeing in the world is a result of people that are terrified of their death and their mortality, not just their mortality, but the end of their existence at the end of their life. And there comes, I think, a selfishness in that, because, wow, I have to look after myself because this is all I've got. And, you know, post-retirement, I've got 15, 20 years left maximum of what I can enjoy, and I want to get the most of it for myself. And it's like little children still that haven't grown up, that don't have that sense of responsibility, firstly for themselves and what their actual true needs were, but then the responsibility for their community, the responsibility globally. I work with a concept of the I, the we, and then the all, in the order of priority of what we need to take care of. But yeah, I think that it makes a sense in a kind of morbid way that people would be living like this. Returning to a previous statement you made, intelligence needs variety. And so you said these kids are leaving their communities to go and experience the world. And you know, the Amish, there was these little clips that I saw of Amish kids that were like, as soon as they had a free day, they would go straight and have Coca-Cola and then find someone with a phone just to play on it. And you know, if we know something exists and we're told about it, when, you know, you tell a kid not to jump off the wall, and the first thing they want to do is go jump off the wall. And so these Amish kids, if they're told that, and same with children in these villages, if they're only given a very specific boundary of what they can explore, if they are intelligent, they're going to want to explore their own boundaries. How would you suggest that we find a way to encourage children that are brought up in these more intentional communities to be able to get their needs met, so they don't want to leave, so that they actually find their contentment, if that's the case in that village or in that community? But what's missing for those children if intelligence needs variety, as you said?
A transmission from someone who has already had the experience that it's great that their intelligence needs variety, it's great that they can go and experience something, but something that they might do might be traumatic, so that they can have the clarity of knowing what to do or what not to do. Because if someone decides, oh, I'm bored, I don't know what to do, I tried everything, and I'm going to try heroin now, there's a very big chance that they're going to traumatize themselves. Because some activities are traumatic. If they decide, I've watched so many of my friends watching glorified army advertising on television, saying, oh, it's freedom, you can travel to this country and that country, and you get paid, and you have safety. And then I watch them 2 years after, 3 years after, and I look at them in the eyes and oh, last time I saw you, you were just about to go to Congo, and you were like so excited about it, and or going to Lebanon, or going to Iraq, and you were like telling me how much money you're going to make, and it's going to be like the solution for your life. And I look at them, and they're like zombies. There's no one home. They're like, they look at me, and they're like, yeah, it was not what I thought it would be. Don't do it.
Coming back to our idea of rites of passage and the essential need for elders to participate in the upbringing of our children. And if I could take some wisdom out of what you've just shared there, one of the greatest travesties that have been visited upon our children today is the removal of trusted adults and elders from their upbringing. And the what's the word for it? The entrustment of our children's education and growth impetus to institutions and governments and teachers that don't have an emotional interest in these children's well-being. And so for me, one of the great things that we could bring back in is children being raised by a village of people that love and care for them, rather than by an institution, rather than by systems of governance that, in my opinion, is much more interested in raising good workers, compliant, docile, domesticated workers, than it is to create an environment for creative, connected, emotionally intelligent human beings. So, yeah, may that be so. May that come to pass.
It's also really important to realize that what I'm passionate about is providing variety, providing an alternative. Because I hear a lot of criticism about people working like in the rat race and all working without thinking. But if you look at a crab colony or an ant colony or a bee colony, they don't have individual personal pleasure. They have this global unity consciousness. They all do the same thing. And we could be looking at them like slaves. We could be looking at them like all those men in suit going to work every day, 9 to 5. It looks like an ant colony. It looks like a bee colony. So I feel there is something. What's important is that a bee colony will be happy and thriving if the bees are happy. But if we have unhappy bees, it's the destruction of the colony. So when someone wants to have the safety of a 9 to 5 job and an apartment and a low paying job, but they have the safety, they can have that. But when they had enough, they say, okay, I experience that now. There is more to life than safety. I want something else, to have the opportunity to have a place where they can go that is safe and where they can thrive and expand and experience something else. So I think having diversity and offering diversity is very important. So for example, someone who lives in a country where there's a housing crisis is unhealthy because someone who doesn't want to live in a city and wants to go and live in nature, there's no houses to live in nature. Because all the houses are taken by the investment property and the businesses and the corporations who are buying all the houses and manipulating prices. So we have a whole generation, or we have generation of people who are in stress, in survival, and kept into this stress, artificial stress, for someone else's benefit that is discussable. Is it normal that a corporation that's not even a human being owns so much and controls so much housing? And is it healthy that we have all the resources in the world to create 10 times paradise on this planet, feed 10 times the whole planet? However, huge percentage of the population is hungry and starving, doesn't have, and is under stress. Like for me, someone has to do something. Someone has to say something and do something. And it's not about focusing on the problem. I think it's about creating what we want, because the more we give energy to something, the more we reinforce it. So if we complain and give energy to the problem by complaining about it, we give it more energy. This is quantum physics. This is like the basic of physics that is now.
Put more energy into a system, it has more power.
Yes, so this is why I want to focus on the alternative. I want to focus on creating communities, creating vegetable garden, creating permaculture spaces, providing guidance, providing coaching to men who are willing to, who have tried something else, providing coaching for women who have, providing trainings, providing breathwork training. It's amazing the insight that we get with half an hour of guided, controlled breathing. Like, this is why I'm really attracted to living in Ubud, because somehow there's a lot of people who are attracted to an alternative life, who are attracted to self-development, because this self-development will give them an alternative to the brainwashing Western society that they've lived at home, to the limited perspective that they had. And I'm not saying it's perfect, and there's a lot of beginners here, and there's a lot of also bypass. It's not perfect, but it is an alternative to other places where there's less.
Sure is. Ubud is, in my mind, it's like Grand Central Station of the spiritual seeker. And people come through here, and there's a lot of people that stop and set up their stall and say, all you newcomers, come and check out this and come and check out that. And there's the breath work, and there's the yoga, and there's, you know, ayahuasca journeys, and there's all of the things for people to have a taste. It's like a festival land where you can come in and have the tapas menu of all things spiritual in Ubud.
Personally, I love it. It's like spiritual Disneyland.
Spiritual Disneyland.
Spiritual Disneyland, that's it. It's not as deep as going in the forest or going in the mountain and going on a 40-day water fast and having a
It's a great place to get a taste tester of all
but
the different things.
It's a great first step. It's a very safe Mama Bali. It's like, okay, now we're going to go away from whatever you have experienced in London or in Paris, and you're going to experience something else. And most people who come here, they don't know why they are here. They just feel, oh, I feel like I've got to come here. I heard it. Someone told me I should come here because it's good. And suddenly they take a yoga class, and they take another one, and they take like.
Yeah, it's a very common story of the people who come to Bali and then find their way to Ubud, and then they discover themselves and they're set on a new path.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a beautiful land.
Yes.
For that. And I want to acknowledge the level of passion and vitality and enthusiasm that you bring to the concepts of caring for each other, caring for the land. caring for our children, caring for this planet is it's quite enticing to be with you in that. And I'm curious, as we wrap up here now, what would be the crystallized piece of wisdom that you could offer me in this moment to summarize what it's like to be Xavier in this time, in this place?
Everything is energy. It's been proven by science. It's been known by Eastern philosophies and yogic philosophies and Tao and Chinese philosophies for tens of thousands of years. It's been discovered by Western science in the past 100 years with Nobel Prizes on realizing that everything is energy, which means everything, like consciousness is influencing energy. Energy is creating matter. So very dense energy creates matter, which means that my consciousness influences energy, influences matter. This is not something we've been taught at school. We've been told that if you drop this glass of water, it's going to fall, so be careful. The apple falls from the tree. This is the Newtonian physics, which we've been living under for hundreds of years.
So what I hear you saying is that to claim responsibility, that your mind is creating your reality.
Not only my mind, there's a lot of factors for it, but for example, my body,
your consciousness,
my consciousness, and everything is interconnected. So, for example, if my body is in a good state, is healthy, and in a good state, it influences my mind and my consciousness, and I'm going to have a lot more creative ideas and better mood and less depression. My body is influenced by what I put in my body. Because if I eat healthy food, organic food coming from a vegetable garden that you have grown yourself with your love and your attention, then you are going to eat that, your body is going to be healthy. Naturally, the biochemistry in my brain is going to be more happy. If I eat food that comes from a supermarket that has been abused because it's animals that have been killed with suffering and I don't even want to know about it because it's too confronting, but I still like my steak, and I eat a piece of steak that is full of fear and suffering, and then the day after I have nightmare, and then after years of that I feel depressed and I want to die, well, there are consequences. So for me, realizing that I have the power to create the life I want, and there is a technology, there is a science to it, and if I want to learn from it now, I can, because information is available everywhere. There are people who are passionate about transmitting that, and it's as simple as if you grow a good garden, you're going to have good food in your garden. As simple as that.
Thank you.
If you want a happy life, there are ways to put the building blocks to create an amazing life with the right piece of building blocks to create the life we choose to live.
Thank you for your wisdom.